Hi everyone and welcome to the Code Clarity podcast. My name is Rina Newton. I'm delighted to be joined today by Deaghlan O'Hagan, who is from Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Deaghlan has a wealth of experience in compliance and medical and senior leadership roles. So Deaghlan, thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about anonymous complainants. Yeah. So for our audience, we're going to be covering quite a lot of information. We'll go through all the key questions. We'll discuss some of the pain points for you all. But at the end, we're going to be leaving you with a single top tip, which is a very constructive suggestion for all parties. So let's start, Deaghlan. Can you maybe tell me a little bit around why does the PMCPA allow anonymous complainants?
Yeah, thanks, Rina. So as I understand it, they want to encourage people to flag things that are an issue within the industry. So they want to make it as open as possible. And therefore, obviously, the easiest way of doing that is to ensure that people can complain while remaining anonymous to all parties. That's my understanding of why they allow it. But I have my own thoughts on that.
Well, we'll get on to that in a minute. And so who typically do we think some of these anonymous complainants actually are?
Well, the thing is, if you think about it, these anonymous complainants could be anybody, because if you're given that option, even if it's a legitimate complaint by a healthcare professional and they're given the option, they're probably going to select to remain anonymous. But what it does do is it opens up the prospect that these complainants could be people from other competitor companies, or it could be people from within the company itself, if they're disgruntled, or somebody who's left the company and has left in a disgruntled way, which is where my issue with the thing really starts, I suppose, but we can get into that.
Is it because you think that some of the disgruntled or current employees are doing it for sort of a commercial, sort of a destructive means to an end rather than a genuine code issue?
Well, yeah, certainly it opens up the prospect that competitors could be doing that, because they could tie up a company, particularly a small company with a small compliance department. They could tie them up, which gives them potentially a competitive edge. And also, though, that goes against the essence of self-regulation. You know, we're in a self-regulating industry. If a competitor company was to put in a complaint to the PMCPA, the first thing the PMCPA would do would direct that company to bring it into intercompany dialogue first before escalating it. So, but then by us creating an anonymous complainant pathway, then it allows companies to bypass that. And that's just one example. Similarly, if we're talking about a disgruntled ex-employee or a disgruntled current employee, you know, if the PMCP were aware that they were affiliated to a company, they would first push them back to ensure that they've availed of that company's whistleblowing policy and their compliance structure, and have attempted to escalate it and resolve it within the company itself before they would accept the complaint. But again, the creation of an anonymous complainant pathway circumvents that. And that's where my issue is when we work in a self-regulated industry.
Right, so that sort of leads on to the next sort of point, which is, why do people feel the need to not go through the proper channels? And that could be talking to a senior leader like yourself, you know, or talking to a colleague, or going through the proper intercompany dialogue routes. Why are they bypassing those? Are we saying there's a failure in your whistleblowing hotline if someone isn't going down that road? Do they have no confidence?
But potentially there is, absolutely, you know, and if that is the case, though, that complainant should highlight that in their complaint, and they should, you know, they should be saying that they've attempted to raise this internally. It hasn't been dealt with, so now I'm taking the next step, and that is a totally legitimate use. But and we'll maybe get on to this when we get to the solution. I think there's a better way of doing that. The other side of it is, though, is that it's not legitimate, and it's more that someone's disgruntled and they don't want to avail of addressing the issue internally through the whistleblowing policies and the governance the company's put in place, but they just want to cause an issue, either on departure as a disgruntled ex-employee, or somebody internal who feels that they've been in some way treated unjustly.
You know, I was asking a company, several companies a couple of months ago, just about the things that get reported to them on their whistleblower hotline. And they're all saying to me, yeah, we action it. It's all super timely. And I said to them, and are you communicating the action that you took widely with the whole organization? And they were like, no. So I think that could also be a reason that someone's issue could be sorted, but actually they want the company to feel the pain, and the public nature of a case on the PMCPA website gives them that sort of gratification.
Possibly, yeah, that's a good point. But then again, and when we come to the solution, and maybe talk a bit more of this, what's to stop that employee raising the complaint and making the PMCP aware that they are an internal employee of a pharmaceutical company, and they feel that they've exhausted everything but nothing has happened, so they're now taking it to the regulator? That's not the way it seems to be working at the moment.
Okay, I feel like you're itching to get to the solution, but before we do that, let's just describe those 3 pain points. So what is the pain for a pharma company first with these anonymous complainants?
So it's very difficult for a company when they receive an anonymous complaint and they can't figure out where that complaint has come from, because it does lead companies to maybe think that there's somebody within the organization who is got access to a lot of sensitive information, who is potentially making complaints. Also, it makes it very difficult for them to investigate things effectively if they can't understand where the complaint is coming from in a number of situations. And then often
sorry to interrupt, how does it affect, because as a leader of a team there, how does it feel knowing that the complainant is either in your team or even in your company? What does it do to staff morale and culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a morale point of view, you start to question why somebody, if they have been the complainant, would decide to go down this route, and it makes you question the structures and the compliance program that you've put in place, I would guess. And it can lead to, I suppose, some companies being a bit paranoid about things. Obviously, this is all dependent on the type of complaint, and only certain people having access to the information that the complaint is about. It can just create a bad environment and morale across the business, I would suggest.
Yeah, and there's a fear culture anyway, right? So this is probably just going to reinforce that. What about the second pain point, which is for the PMCPA? What is the pain for them when dealing with anonymous complainants?
I mean, for me, I think there's lots of pain points for the PMCPA. I think their caseload is quite significant. It's a massive caseload to get through, and I think that is created by the fact that anybody can drop in any complaint, remain anonymous, and provide no evidence, and that's a pain point. And we've seen the PMCPA have had to then go to the market to try and recruit more staff, so it's difficult for them. I think with an anonymous complainant as well, a lot of them remain uncontactable, so then it makes it difficult for the PMCPA to get the sufficient evidence to pass it to the company to do a thorough investigation. So that obviously takes up their time. And then ultimately, when it comes to it, a lot of these cases are then referred to the PMCPA panel, as we know from the case prep manager. And the panel then are in a position where they have an anonymous complainant who often hasn't provided a lot of evidence. They're non-contactable, so they can't go back to get any evidence. And so we see across a lot of cases that there's no breach because the burden of proof is on the complainant, and the complainant has provided no evidence and remained anonymous.
But of course, you and I have read the 17 pages beforehand to get to this. Really, it's a bit of a really sad conclusion when you think, oh, after all of that, there was not insufficient evidence, right?
Exactly, and that's another topic maybe for another day.
Yeah, another one. So the third pain point is to the complainant themselves. What is painful to them in staying anonymous?
Yeah, I mean, as an anonymous complainant, they're not going to be included in due process, so they're not going to see the completion of the case, because if they're anonymous, for example, they cannot be present at an appeal board because they're anonymous. They are going to have no sort of correspondence outside of maybe the email address that they give to say what the outcome was. So they're not included in the process, and they're not kept up to date with all the steps in the process. So from a satisfaction point of view, I can't see them being overly satisfied at the end of things.
And certainly there are cases where after the case ruling is published, the anonymous complainant reads that and puts something else in. So we definitely have seen that sort of pattern. Okay, so we've discussed the 3 pain points and a lot of other questions as well. What do you think is the solution for all of those 3 parties, a workable solution that would take away the pain but still preserve self-regulation?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 elements to it. I think the first element is that all complainants must be contactable. Okay, so they must provide the PMCPA when they put in a complaint contact details, and they must remain contactable throughout the process. And the second part to that is, I think I absolutely agree that they should remain anonymous to the company that they're complaining against, and anonymous to the industry and anything that's put in the public domain. But they should not remain anonymous to the PMCPA. So a possible solution is almost on the application form or the form online where they submit a complaint, they have to make them aware of their name, who they are, and they have to be contactable. And the reason for this is because if a company was to put in a complaint to the PMCPA about another company, the first thing the PMCPA would do would direct that company to initiate inter-company dialogue, first of all, before escalating it. And similarly, if an employee puts in a complaint to the PMCPA would push back on the employee to make sure that they'd exhausted all internal avenues, whistleblowing, all the sort of elements of the pillar of compliance in their compliance program before they would then take on the complaint. So the transparency of the complainant is critical for then the PMCPA being able to manage the complaint in the correct way. In terms of how does that remove pain? So there's a few aspects of it. I think if people had to be transparent about who they were and contactable, I think that would possibly reduce the amount of complaints that come in, because people just can't drop a complaint in anonymously. So you would reduce
or without evidence, just to cause a bit of work. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like 2-minute job online. So that would reduce the caseload for the PMCPA. That would also have a benefit to the pharmaceutical companies, who often their departments are tied down trying to respond to these complaints. So that reduction in complaints would have a benefit for both the PMCPA and the pharmaceutical companies. And then in terms of the complainant, I think they would have a much more satisfactory due process whenever they put in a legitimate complaint, because they would be constantly in contact with the regulator. They would be involved in the outcome. They could attend appeal boards if they want to. And remember, at appeal boards, they can still remain anonymous to the company they're complaining against. And there has to be that trust in the PMCPA that they would not obviously leak the information from the complainant, which we know that they wouldn't. So that for me is remain contactable, no anonymous complainants to the PMCPA allowed, but they are obviously they remain anonymous to the rest of the industry and the company and the public.
And so the benefits of this would be a reduced workload, faster processing, better quality of complaints, and probably genuinely upholding the principles of self-regulation. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Deaghlan. I enjoyed that. See you soon.
No problem. Yeah, thanks, Rina. Bye.